Hello, this is Uncle Milo's Story Corner. I'm Uncle Milo, and this is part 2 of When You Wish Upon a Star. Dad nodded his head seriously. Yes, I went to England to study it. Not the real machine, of course. That one vanished. The story tells that part clearly, but the time traveler left notes. The H.G. Wells Institute preserved a lot of his records on how the machine was built. The traveler thought he was moving forward and backward in time. In reality, he was moving sideways. Sideways? I asked, surprised. That doesn't make sense. Not at all at first, Uncle Bob said. You can imagine how surprised I was when Roger showed up at my door. Here was my identical double, and he... Bob, Dad interrupted, let me tell my own story. Sorry, Uncle Bob chuckled. He went to a refrigerator and pulled out more cans of pop for us. Dad took a swallow of pop. So anyway, he started again, I was able to build a time machine. And you should know this, I was crazy about your mom, Tiffany Stardust. She was all I could think about. So you built this time machine thing and you were going to impress her? I asked with a sneer. I was not impressed. No, you've got it all wrong, Dad said, excited now. This machine goes across time to where other possibilities become real, to an alternate universe where things turned out differently. If you go far enough, you can go to where the Confederate States of America won the Civil War, or the Nazis won World War II, or where the Yankees never won any World Series. Sideways in time, Uncle Bob chimed in, can look like going forward and backward in time when you go in particular directions. The time traveler happened to hit one of those particular splines. But it isn't going backward and forward because there's no cause and effect. If you really went backward in time, you could create time paradoxes, kill your parents, that sort of thing. Some scientists believe that's part of why it takes more than infinite energy to actually go backwards. Okay, enough of the physics lesson, Dad chided him. Let me finish explaining the situation to James. He turned to me. Here's the thing. I wanted your mom, Tiffany Stardust. Judy Pot Horrocks. I couldn't get near her while she was a star. But if I could find a universe where she never went to Hollywood... I still don't see what you're talking about, I said stubbornly. Dad continued patiently. I fired up the machine. It took a lot of energy, but the world where I grew up has plenty of it, and I went to a slightly different universe. I went, in one particular direction, stopped, got out, and went to a newsstand. I bought a gossip magazine and looked inside. Tiffany Stardust was there. So that first trip was a bust. I just went home. But I proved my idea worked. Here, he finished, handing me a coin. I looked at it. It's a nickel, I said. Check the date and turn it over, Dad told me. It was a 2003 nickel. I turned it over. Instead of the Jefferson Memorial on the back, there was a pair of hands and some other stuff. This is real, I asked. Of course, Dad said earnestly. I got it as change when I bought that magazine. I've kept it all these years because it proved right away that I was in a different universe. He went on. So I went back. Then I tried again. I went farther and farther. Every time, I'd go down the block, go to the newsstand, and buy the same gossip magazine. Eventually, I went far enough, and Tiffany Stardust wasn't in it. He sighed. Then the real hard work began. I knew where your mom was born and where she grew up, but now I had to track her down. It's actually quite hard to locate somebody who's a nobody, even though she was just as gorgeous as when she was Tiffany Stardust. He threw me a wink. So you found her, I asked. I was starting to get into this. This sounded crazy, but hey, it seemed to make sense, too. Everything was starting to fit into place. Well, it took me 2 weeks, and when I finally found her, she was happily married. That took me back. I hadn't expected that. So I got her parents' phone number, went back to my starting place, and tried again. He continued. Now it was a regular routine. Every time I arrived, first, down to the newsstand to buy the gossip magazine. Then, as soon as I confirmed that Tiffany Stardust didn't exist, phone her parents. I asked if their daughter was working in Hollywood. One time, she was working under another name. Chance. It really can throw a wrench into things. Finally, though, I got here. It was the 108th trip out. I went down to the newsstand, bought the magazine, and no Tiffany Stardust. I called her parents. She was at home. They put her on. I told her I was a secret admirer, and could I come over, talk to her, and she said yes. So that was the beginning. Well, not quite the beginning, put in Uncle Bob. He came to me first. Imagine my surprise when I opened my door and found me, myself, standing in front of me. Dad explained to me, I had to start off fair and square. I had to travel, and I knew I couldn't bring Tiffany, your mom, back to my world. So the best thing would be to go look myself up and see if me wanted to cooperate. Which has been very lucrative, I'll have you know, Uncle Bob beamed. They got stuff in your dad's word that has made me very well-to-do. They're slightly ahead of this world in video technology and certain computer applications. That's where I've gotten filthy rich. Couldn't have done it without Roger here. All the steam of my anger had drained out by now. I asked Uncle Bob, is Dad's name really Roger? Nope, he answered, it's Robert. Just like me. We did a little bit of careful adjustment on a copy of his birth certificate and made like he was my twin. It's worked out fine. Nobody knows any better. Your grandparents are in on the secret. Most of the other relatives are either too old or too confused to know any better. Dad said, "Okay, now, to finish the story, I met your mom, told her about how she was a movie star in another place that I had come from. She wasn't sure if I was sane or totally off my rocker. But when I showed her and her family some Tiffany Stardust films, she came around. She could see how nuts I was about her. For years, she was secretly certain that I was making all of this up because I was crazy about her. She loves the attention. So I married her, got a job, and then you came along." He sat back, threw his hands wide, and asked, "Well, what do you think?" I looked at the strange machine. It sure looked different from anything else I'd ever seen. "So you go back every year?" I asked. "It gets harder and harder," Dad admitted. "It's so far now that it takes all year to build up enough energy to go back to where Tiffany Stardust is. The area shrank over time. In some places she retired. In some she died of various causes. The last few years I've been able to find one place where she's having a decent late career doing TV shows. That's where I was able to get copies of Frisco Broke." Uncle Bob broke in, "But of course technology is drifting too. That's why you have to have that special equipment we brought back 3 years ago. The Laserdisc technology they standard on isn't compatible with anything here. They just don't do 35mm sound film anymore." "Yes, every year I wonder if it's going to be the last year," Dad admitted. "Your mom is worth it, though. She knows that one day it'll be over, but it's been a great run. To be married to a movie star, to Tiffany Stardust, what a thrill it is." He sighed with contentment. "Roger," Uncle Bob said. He had a grin on his face a mile wide. "What?" Dad asked. "What about the kid?" "What about him?" Dad replied. Then his face lit up too. "James," he said. "Well, what about it?" "What?" I asked. I was totally puzzled. What were these two hinting at? "What about it?" Dad asked. He pointed. "There's the time machine. In a couple more years, you'll be 21. Then it'll be your turn." "Me?" I asked. "What do you mean?" Dad asked me, serious now, "Who would you marry if you could wish upon a star?" And that's the end of that story. Tune in again to the next Uncle Milo Story Corner episode, which will be the sing-song of Old Man Kangaroo.